Here on the program, of course, like I said, Rahul Gandhi's program in the United States continues for another few more days. We will be on top of the stories as they emerge from there and whatever comments he makes in the response here from the government. Meanwhile, shifting focus as the Modi government completes 9 years. One area where the government claims it has made a visible difference is in the field of national security. In Kashmir, Article 370 has been abrogated. Kashmir also recently very successfully hosted a G20 meeting. The government has from time to time cited statistics in Parliament about the number of terror incidents coming down in the valley. Whether it is the surgical strikes, the Balakot airstrikes, Pakistan has been made to pay a price for sponsoring terrorism. But the relationship with either Pakistan or China, for that matter, is far from normal. In a moment, I'll be speaking with Dr. Jitendra Singh, who's the MOS in the Prime Minister's office. But first, the story of how the national security picture has changed in the last 9 years.
सौगंध मुझे इस मिट्टी की, मैं देश नहीं मिटने दूंगा, मैं देश नहीं रुकने दूंगा, मैं देश नहीं झुकने दूंगा।
The Modi-led government has made nationalism a theme of its governance, even at the risk of being labelled hyper-nationalistic by its rivals. But the centre's resolve against enemies outside our borders and inside has translated into action on the ground. Since the Modi government took over in 2014, there has been a 79% dip in terror killings, 52% dip in terror incidents until 2022, a 69% jump in increase of terrorists killed in Jammu and Kashmir so far, and a 61% drop in Maoist or Red Terror. India has minced no words in calling out Pakistan at every world forum, exposing their support to terror groups flourishing on their soil.
Bottom line on this issue is that it is for us very difficult to engage with a neighbor who practices cross-border terrorism against us. We have always said that they have to deliver on their commitment not to encourage, sponsor and carry out cross-border terrorism.
From Uri in 2016 to Balakot in 2019 and Galwan in 2020. Under Prime Minister Modi, India isn't afraid of standing up to any bully at any border. Both on the eastern and the western frontier, our forces have pushed the enemy back consistently. The nation has been secured not just from physical threats but also virtual. Hundreds of Chinese apps have been banned in India already, apps that threaten to bring our data under Chinese surveillance. Even big tech such as Google, Meta and Twitter have been forced to comply with the law of the land. India is leading from the front at world fora, assured that the country is secure and safe, not just with a robust policy, but also with a strong determination.
All right, joining me now is MOS, PMO and Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh. Thank you very much, Dr. Singh, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. 9 years of Mr. Modi's government. We just ran a package on national security and how that paradigm has seemingly changed. What has been your assessment of this journey so far, particularly when it comes to national security? What, in your mind, have been the top two or three things that the Modi Sarkar has done, which you believe has not been done in the last 75 years?
Today, the esteem of an Indian or even his self-esteem is at a very high level. An Indian is proud of being an Indian, whether he's living within the country or he's outside the country as a diaspora. And I think the single most important factor which has contributed to this is the personal outreach of Prime Minister Modi and the manner he's been able to successfully transform the entire perception through a very hard work and through a number of path-breaking reforms. Today, Prime Minister Modi stands as the world's tallest leader, and the world looks up to India to be led by it, to take cues from what India is doing under Prime Minister Modi. I think one of the most distinguished examples is that of COVID. Now, for example, during the COVID times, the entire world was looking up to India with a huge degree of apprehension. And India was being, seen as with a lot of contempt, as if this was a hot spot, a country of 130, 140 crore people, always not very appreciably able to manage its population. And everybody assumed that we would not be able to manage ourselves during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And we would become actually a nuisance for the other countries. But it's the other way around. We've seen how European countries with just 500,000 population could not contain themselves, whereas it was India under Prime Minister Modi, which not only managed to contain COVID, but also came up with the first ever DNA vaccine and provided it to the other countries of the world, to the rest of the world. And this was happening from a country which was, till a decade or so ago, not very distinguishedly known as a country, as a society which had much of an aptitude for preventive health care. Even healthcare did not receive much precedence either at the level of the society or the level of the policy planners. So the entire scenario is changed.
Okay.
The startup, for example, now nobody had heard what it was all about till Prime Minister spoke from the ramparts of the Red Fort and said, Startup India, Stand-up India. Even that day I know how many people had heard of it. Today from 350 we've jumped to 1 lakh, and each of the startup groups is employing another thousands and thousands. And in the world ecosystem, we are number 3 as far as startups goes. In global innovation index, we have jumped 41 places, from 81 to 40. I can go on and on to narrate figures, to cite comparison, because comparison is important.
One of the things that you had not mentioned, of course, and I'm asking you this because you come from there, you come from Jammu and Kashmir, is the abrogation of Article 370. You were also recently in Kashmir inaugurating that G20 meeting, which successfully concluded. And at that meeting, at that address, you commented about how earlier when there were big meetings in Srinagar, there used to be boycott calls from across the border, and some people in the valley also would listen to those boycott calls. None of that happened this time around. The government says that there is data to show that the number of terror incidents in the valley has come down, and yet by no stretch would the relationship with either Pakistan or, for that matter, China be characterized as normal. So what would you attribute to this change of ground situation in Kashmir?
No, I think that's because Prime Minister Modi has, you see, right from the beginning, he gave us 2 broad mantras. One was zero tolerance towards corruption, other was zero tolerance towards terrorism. And in the context of the sensitive areas like Jammu and Kashmir, when these 2 mantras were applied in letter and spirit with all the sincerity, particularly in the last 3 years or 4 years, you've seen the results happening. It was because of terrorism not being handled in the manner it should have, because with 1 step forward, 2 step backward approach by the then political leadership, which was looking, which always had a vote back on the back of its mind. But on the contrary, Prime Minister Modi felt the pulse of the people of Kashmir, where the people of Kashmir are highly aspirational. The people of the common man walking the streets of Srinagar wants to move on. The youth of Kashmir is not only aspirational, he is very well awakened, he is very well informed, he has had a rich legacy of making a distinguished contribution to India's civil services and all the other leading areas, and that milieu was not being provided to him because of a wheel of fear, militancy. And once that is gone, you see how this year we had nearly 1.6 or 1.7 crore tourists in Kashmir Valley. So this means the change was waiting to happen, but those at the helm either did not have the vision to carry it forward, or they had some other vested interest because they flourished in that mayhem of terrorism. So there was a group or nexus which had flourished, whether it was the polity, whether it is the trade, whether it is the industry, and the ruling dispensations, generation after generation, flourishing under the shadow of terrorism, where voting percentage would be just 10%, 12%, and they would get elected as members of parliament and members of the legislative assembly, and then go on to become chief minister and ministers from generation to generation. So all that is over now.
One criticism, though, Dr. Singh, and this is my final question, that the opposition constantly raises against Mr. Modi's government is on 2 issues. Number one, price rise, the other, unemployment. They're saying that on both of these issues, the Modi government has not done a good job, that people are hurting. And also they've criticized the recent inauguration of the new parliament, saying that, opposition leaders were not invited, the president was not invited. India is slipping away from being a democracy to some kind of electoral autocracy. How would you respond to that criticism?
No, I think these kind of accusations hardly need to be responded to, because it's opposition. It has to oppose. You cannot ask the Congress to come and pat my back and say very well done. Otherwise, what would they contest election for? And then they say autocracy. The whole, why Prime Minister Modi is being looked up to by the rest of the world? Because he has been decisively elected by 140 crore people of this country. Is that autocracy? For the first time, we have a stable government. That's why the world is looking up to us. India has become a favorite destination for investment, for business, for negotiation, for diplomacy. Because they see a democratically elected stable government, which is rare. We have had stable governments lasting for decades together. It could be a Marxist government, it could be a communist government, a fascist government, dictatorships. But never here. And have you seen consistently someone continuing as head of state for more than 2 decades, for 23 years? None of the prime ministers in the past have. Even Mrs. Gandhi gave up after a decade. So here we have a head of state who's been popularly elected again and again, and he has defied the principle of diminishing returns. On the contrary, with each successive election, he gets higher mandate.
Okay.
So where is the autocracy? I think it's the democracy in the best form. And then you are just now talking about Jammu and Kashmir. I think that's the best example of democracy being actually followed in letter and spirit is Prime Minister Modi, who introduced grassroots democracy at the level of district development councils.
Okay.
I'm sure someday the historians will ask why Jammu and Kashmir, unlike other states and union territories, had to wait for 70 long years to have a elected district council. And mind you, it was those parties which are talking of autonomy, which are talking of self-rule. Now, to you and me, simple definition of democracy would be the self-rule is the rule of the self.
All right. Dr. Jitendra Singh, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story plays out, particularly in the run-up to 2024. Thank you very much for joining us in the meanwhile and speaking to CNN News 18. That's a wrap. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.